world-renowned global warming tour. I know he also got you a Shinola watch from Detroit, which I think has not been delivered yet, but it's a powerful thing. I have been there many times, and I probably bought more of those watches than any individual American, just to give them away, because it makes a point. They sell only the watch works are made in Switzerland, and it's part of their marketing because every one of those watches costs between 10 and 20% of what it would cost you anywhere in the world, because everything else is made in America. And there are two production lines, one of them headed by a woman who was cleaning the building, the whole empty General Motors building, when Tom Carlogos, who sucked $45 million of his own money in this without a clue whether it would work, met her, and he said, "You're smart. You think you can work on the production line?" She said, "Sure." So he put her to work. A few weeks later, he said, "You're the best watchworker we've got. All these big hulking guys I hired keep coming to you to figure out how to do it better. You think you could manage a production line?" She said, "Sure." So I get there, and here's this woman who just a few weeks earlier was on her knees cleaning a building, running a production line, making wonderful watches, rebuilding the economy of one of our cities. It's a metaphor for what all of you believe in and what you can do. The longtime mayor of Boston, Tom Menino, who was a good friend of Hillary's and mine, once said the true privilege of being mayor is that I have the opportunity to be everyone's neighbor. I think his successor, Marty Walsh, is proving to be a worthy good neighbor. But that's really true for all of you. I got up this morning and I wrote this out, so if you will forgive me, I normally, just speak off the top of my head, but this is what I sort of think you do. You're a neighbor because you actually see and hear from your constituents every day. I'll never forget walking down the streets of Columbia with Steve Benjamin. Funky little place he took me in to get coffee and rolls. Some of the things I've done with many of you. You don't see these people as demographic groups to be delivering whole cloth for votes. You see them as real human beings who want a chance to work, to learn, to start businesses, to raise kids on safe streets, to live in decent, affordable housing, and to be able to retire in dignity and to be of use in old age. They're likely to be proud of their own identity, but to relish urban diversity. They want police they can trust, rely on, and look up to, without worrying about whether their kids will not come home someday because of the color of their skin, the way they dress, their fondness for tattoos, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And of course, they want the garbage picked up and the potholes fixed. They hire you to figure out how to do all this and to keep them involved along the way. Otherwise, your job is a snap. This morning, you read about sustainability, healthcare, and jobs. When I leave, you'll talk about the need for immigration reform and to find ways to curb gun violence. The commitment you have to actually doing real things that affect people's lives in a positive way is the main reason I showed up every year to talk to you when I was in the White House, and have come back several times since. There is no point in any other politics other than that which dominates being a mayor today. The rise of tribalism all over the world is basically, I'm convinced, a reaction to the profound dislocations of the global financial crisis and the speed with which all the old social and economic arrangements have been uprooted, and the deepening decades-long trend toward greater inequality. And you can add your own list. But in the end, what tribalism amounts to is politics rooted in a simple principle. It's us versus them. I want us to win, and for us to win, they have to lose. If you did that, most of you would be out of a job. In a very profound way, the cities have become the laboratories of democracy. And I mean that in no disrespect to the states, but when I was a governor, first elected in the 1970s, we could still really lay claim to that. We had Republicans and Democrats, we had vigorous debates over various issues, but we showed up, worked with each other. Almost never did anybody pull a cheap shot or try to make anybody else look bad. And we had honest differences. You know, what should be America's policy toward Western land, and how did it play out in the funding of the schools? It wasn't really, in our mind, a partisan decision. It had to do with what's the fair way to raise money and what do the kids need. How can the Native Americans be brought into the mainstream of American life? Probably still haven't so. If they live on native lands without gambling casinos, still the lowest income of all people. And every one of them, west of Mississippi, lives on tribal lands that could be 100% energy independent with solar and wind, and could export clean energy to the nearest grid. And I'm still wrestling with it, trying to figure it out. The opioid epidemic has touched just about everything. Kelly and I have lost, 5 of our friends have lost their children. One was an African American, literal genius. One was an Indian American, second generation immigrant who worked for both of us. And one was a Kosovar, whose parents were neighbors of mine, and whose uncle was in the government of Kosovo, which I was so involved with when I was president. 2 were old-fashioned Americans. One whose father was the chairman of the Public Service Commission in Arkansas, and I appointed him. And the other, his father is one of my closest friends today, and also worked for me in 1974. This helps, hurts everything. Now, this is the first drug epidemic that ever, in the beginning, had higher addiction rates in small-town and rural America than in rural America. And there have been some very pointed observations lately, which I don't disagree with, that maybe we're seeing this finally as a public health problem it is, instead of something to be handled solely through the criminal justice system, because it hit more white people than African Americans and Latinos. But I also think we have to remember something else, because some of you are seeing the end of it. The other reason is that in the beginning, this despicable epidemic had a less violent delivery system. Our kids were delivered, and a lot of our adults were delivered into a paralyzing addiction by doctors, pharmacists, and drug manufacturers. Not by armed gangs. However, this movie is coming to a theater near you. You are the laboratories of democracy. Do you believe, because we're the longest lasting democracy in history, that we're just a spent force now? That's what a lot of our allies are asking about. Or do you believe this is just another stop along the way? We always had our rough spots. And we suck it up, figure out what has to be done, and do it. I'm betting the latter is true. But if it is true, it's got to be because of people like you, who take jobs like yours, where you get paid to provide service, solve problems, and seize opportunities. And to do it for everybody. When you really believe everybody counts, when you believe in inclusive economics, inclusive society, you can do this. You are doing it. But you have to convince the people you're doing it with and for that this is the way America ought to work. You are what the framers had in mind when they said, if we just work at it long enough and we follow these rules, we will never be perfect. We will have fits and starts. We'll go forward and back. But we will always form a more perfect